Welcome to Truth, Money, and Freedom. Today is Monday, March 18th, 2019, and I'm going to cover several stories today. And I want to talk about the economy today. The economy as put forth by the media, and the economy is put forth by news stories, and the economy put forth by the alternative media all tell different stories. They're all very different. And I'm going to go through some stories here, and then I'm going to cite you some statistics at the end of it. But look at this story right here. New York City is edging towards financial disaster, experts warn. They aren't even collecting enough tax revenue anymore to support the city, and they're about as high as they can go on taxes. And what I mean by that is if they continue to bring taxes up, they'll literally chase everyone out. And it's already starting to happen. And anyone with any money, that is, and the people with money. So that's the case with New York City. New York City is in dire straits. I mean, it's not like they're collapsing right now or anything, but I'm not 100% sure that they're going to be able to have a proper budget by 2020. The savings that they have, basically. Is not enough to actually stave off, as it says here, stave off the bloodbath. The New York City's economy is hit by financial shocks, including recession, which some see on the horizon. I am one of those people. The bond yield curve inversion is telling us that we have a recession coming. In fact, it's probably already here. Now, other countries are starting to go through this. I don't want to get into too much of this. Like I said, I've already got a lot of stuff to cover. Australia is officially in a recession. Italy is officially in a recession. What is a recession? That's 2 quarters in a row of negative GDP growth. So, but we have one coming, and the bond yields are telling us it's probably already here. It's already here in America. We just don't know it yet. You always know about 6 months after the recession begins. That's when it's announced by the media anyway. But basically, we could keep going through this, but New York's, they're just not bringing enough tax money to support their massive programs there. It's just that simple. And we got rich people leaving. Rich people fleeing New York in droves, study shows. More people moved out of New York. Um, the wealthy are leading the exodus. Well, that makes sense because they're going after them with taxes. The taxes are just so high. And by the way, this is not just New York. This is happening in a lot of places. For instance, in Illinois and Chicago. Um, so once again, this flies in the face of everything everyone's been telling you about the economy for years, talking about how wonderful the economy is. Mainstream media, pardon me, loves to tout this. They love to say how beautiful the economy, especially under Obama, the economy just wasn't, it's never been better. It's awesome. It's been a roaring recovery from the 2008 Great Recession. Well, how can that be? Because we were also seeing on the news that all these stores were closing. In fact, that's still going on to this day. It has not stopped. Stores, retail outlets are closing down like crazy. Sometimes it's in the media, sometimes it's not. But you just do a Google search, store closings 2018, store closings 2019. They're there. It's still happening. So, once again, the exodus has started. And that's because basically they keep raising taxes in New York City. That's what you do. If you keep raising taxes, the rich eventually just leave. And there's even initiatives now to go after folks that, quote unquote, live in New York City, have an address there, but they actually work in a different state and don't come home to New York very often. And now there's an aggressive program to go after those folks so they can squeeze every last tax penny, possible out of these folks. Next story, the exodus of New York City's endangered middle class. Now, the middle class are starting to leave New York City now. So, okay, so we've covered now that New York City is edging towards financial disaster. Okay, we've already covered that. Now we got the rich people, all right, and I will link all these stories below as I always do. The rich people are leaving. And now we got the exodus of the middle class. The middle class are starting to leave as well. So New York City's in trouble. They're not going to have any tax revenue left. So they're going to have to start reducing programs. They're actually going to have to start reversing some of these taxes. I don't see how they can keep going on, basically raising taxes when everyone who has money is thinking about leaving. Some of them have already started. Okay, next story. New York exodus crisis isn't over, despite what Como, whatever his name is, suggests. It's an opinion piece, and it's in the Syracuse New Times. So, pardon me, I'm sorry. So in this story, Como is basically saying that, the exodus crisis, or I'm sorry, he's saying it's over, that people are stopping leaving New York. No, they're not. They're still leaving New York. And the census data shows us this. Similar things are happening, for instance, in St. Louis. Um, but I bring that up because I saw it in the story. I live in Missouri. St. Louis is half the city it was just 40 years ago. People have been moving out of there since, basically the car industry moved out of there, the car assembly plants. So people go where there's work, they go where there's lower taxes. And that was a reason I moved to Missouri. That's one of the reasons I moved. I originally come from Minnesota. The taxes are just too high in Minnesota. For a guy who's self-employed, I mean, you just get nailed in Minnesota. It's pretty tough in those blue states sometimes. Okay, next story is residents increasingly fleeing New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. So now we're covering Los Angeles and Chicago as well. So that's also a big part of this whole pattern. It's getting out of these cities where the taxes are so high, possibly the states. So Chicago, which being Cook County, I think we've covered that in previous podcasts. They have some of the highest real estate taxes in the entire United States in Chicago. And it's because the teachers union pension fund was going bust. So they go and double, everyone's property taxes. I can't remember the year. I think it might have been 2013. And that's just to, fund the teachers' pension plan, which was, squandered, or they lost a lot of it with the stock market drop back in 2009 or 2008 time period. So, folks, I'm telling you, what you hear in the mainstream media about our awesome economy that they've been talking about forever is wrong. GDP growth during Obama's entire term in office, I'm not blaming Obama. I'm not doing that. It's just during those time periods. So we're talking 2008 to 2016, we never even crossed 2% GDP growth. That's a zombie economy. It's not growing. And when you do hear about growth, you have to wonder whether or not it's a zombie economy. You have to wonder if, basically it's all that money printing that's going on at the Federal Reserve, which is actually putting a little bit of life in the economy. You pay for it later, because you form, deficits and ultimately, a debt that you have to pay back plus interest. So, that always comes at a price. But can we get out of it this next time? They printed some $4 trillion, the Federal Reserve, to get us out of 2008. And that's the official numbers. And, I dare say the unofficial numbers are much higher than that. So, okay, moving on to the next story. 800,000 people are about to flee New York and California because of taxes, say economists. Once again, the taxes are too high. Now, is it because taxes are just suddenly raising out of control in these areas? Well, maybe not. But we do know that the here in the United States anyway, we have the CPI numbers that come in to show us, basically what inflation is. And the Federal Reserve has been very, very good at letting us know inflation's been under 2%, like forever, since the Great Recession. It's been under 2%. They have struggled and put so much effort to try and raise inflation because 2% just isn't good enough, right? What if I told you those numbers were completely wrong and they knew it and the government knew it and the numbers were actually about 10% inflation? Well, you should know this already. If you've ever shopped for a car or a house or did standard grocery shopping in the last 10 years, prices are going up faster than 2% a year. They are. Look at cars. Cars are doubled since 2008. Literally doubled. They're twice the price they were. In some cases, 75% more, but still, I mean, 100% more on many vehicles, especially trucks. So, who do we believe? The Federal Reserve? Well, we know they lie to us. The 2% inflation is just ridiculous. It's 10%. We know this from John Williams at shadowstats.com. So, and the trickery is so easy to see through. What they do to actually hide this from you. They don't include gasoline. They don't include medical. They don't include the price of homes in the CPI numbers they do today. Heck, they don't even include pharmaceuticals, which go up, greater than 10% a year. They take all of these things out, and all you're left with is electronics and clothing. They even take food out. Food is not part of it. Gasoline's not part of it. So electronics and clothing prices year over year is the only thing they use to determine inflation. Well, since America has basically moved everything to China for manufacturing, and we have, I mean, it was first the maquiladoras in Mexico, then we brought everything to China. The Everything's cheaper to make now. So inflation on electronics and clothing at 2% sounds reasonable to me. It sounds like what they have been. In fact, many of them have gone down. Look at the price of flat panel televisions. They've gone down quite a bit. But that's not true with gasoline. That's not true with the price of medicine, pharmaceuticals, or, going to the doctor. That's gone up quite a bit with Obamacare. I mean, that went up. That went up like crazy. Actually, that's probably 100% in the last 10 years, just because of Obamacare. Not even 10 years, 8 years. So basically, as I go through these stories, I'm wanting you guys to understand the concepts of this. It's because everyone's bills are going up. Their electricity bill's going up. The bill for, your medical costs is going up. Your premiums, that you pay, basically through your work, your half of the premium. If you're lucky enough, your corporation or your company you work for pays for part of that for you. Helps to bring down the cost, just a benefit of working there. But maybe it's not because taxes are going up. It's because all the other costs are going up and people can't afford those taxes anymore. I think that's probably a big part of it. Taxes go up too, but I'm not sure they're going up at the rate of everything else. And that 2% that the Federal Reserve loves to throw in our faces is wrong. It's dead wrong. I mean, everyone knows it in their heart, mind, and soul that these numbers the Federal Reserve gives us are wrong. They're completely wrong. And why do you think they revise the GDP literally a month after they release it? So GDP numbers, for a quarter will be announced the first month of the next quarter towards the end of the month. And then a month later, they revise that number again, and it's always downward. Always. Did you guys ever, think about that one? That's been a trend that really started during the Obama era, where they they just keep coming back a month later and revising the GDP a month after they announce. That's a bad sign right there. I mean, they're intentionally fudging the numbers to make everything look better, and they come back and give you more honest numbers a month later every time. This is, like I said, the new norm. It's the new norm. It's like the stock market swings are so wild. That's the new norm. I'm 47. When I was a kid, the stock market didn't swing 700 points in a day. That just didn't happen. You just didn't see swings like that. You see it up, like 0.2%. Now if the stock market's not going up 5%, everyone gets upset. So the new norm is volatility, and just outright deception. Let's go to the next story. Housing slump. Foreclosure activity jumps in Austin, Miami, San Diego, and Seattle. So we have foreclosures now happening around the United States. Well, that plays in exactly with what I was saying. Inflation is up. People can't afford stuff anymore. They can't afford, and I've done the story about the auto sales and the repossessions and, basically default rates on car loans. If you guys haven't seen that, just, look on the channel here. Truth, Money, and Freedom podcast and go back and look at that. It's like 37% of all the current auto loans are technically in default. They're 90 days in arrears. This is, guys, we're in trouble. We're in trouble, and it's not just us. It's happening everywhere in the world at the same time. But here's the final story I'm going to do on this particular podcast. Jamie Dimon, who is, by the way, the CEO of J.P. Morgan, says we've split the U.S. economy, leaving the poor behind. Now, may I suggest that's true? That's actually true. He's telling a truth here, but he's left out 95% of the truth. That's what he's done, because who's getting left behind is the middle class. The poor have been left behind too. They're always left behind, always. No one cares about the poor. The middle class are the ones who pay a lot of taxes and actually make the economy work, have the small businesses that employ the most amount of people. These are the ones who are taking it in the shorts right now. The middle class is becoming extinct. And it's because of Federal Reserve policy that's happening. It's because of fascism and what they call, basically crony capitalism that this is happening. When you have bailouts, the government picks the winners, and the winners set the rules. And this is what's happening here. So basically, if you want to, and I will link every single one of these stories that I've went through down below, so you guys could take a closer look at these stories here. But he's saying that 40% of Americans make less than $15 an hour. 40% of Americans can't afford a $400 bill, whether it's medical or fixing their car. May I suggest to you that that is actually accurate? That's actually an accurate statement, and it's scary. It's very scary. But why is it happening? That's that's what I'm here to maybe explore with you guys. Why is this happening? And we can complain all we want. We can come up with the statistics, but why is it happening? And that's because we have a corrupt federal government tied to a Federal Reserve banking system that prints up whatever the government wants, and the government gives their money to their friends, their buddies. That's crony capitalism, fascism. That's what's going on here. And they can roll out Jamie Dimon whenever they want to come out and do a story and make him sound so smart, by saying, "Oh yeah, we do have a dichotomy here. There's rich and there's poor." Well, of course there is, because he's part of the problem. The big banks are a big part of the problem, and he knows it. He knows it. But what he is not saying in this article is that the middle class is literally starting to get wiped out. In fact, the starting happened in 2008. Maybe before then, if you want to look at the tax rates, for the middle class. The middle class always get hit hard on tax rates. I am in the middle class, and my taxes have gone up. So I can tell you that. But this is something where I think they're trying to create an illusion here that the minimum wage is the problem. The minimum wage is not the problem. It has never been the problem. It will never be the problem. It is the overprinting of currency, the bailing out of large corporations, the government borrowing more money than it has to spend. That's the problem. It's not minimum wage. Minimum wage, we'll do a podcast about minimum wage sometime, because I have a lot to say about that as well. But I want you guys to know that, I've been watching this stuff for years, studying this stuff. I'm not an economist. I mean, I've had a few questions in the past, TC, what is it you do? And I'm an IT guy. I'm actually an IT guy. I do IT work, specialize in lots of areas of IT. That's what I do for a living, and I'm self-employed. I am not an economist. But most self-employed people become economists, by default. For a whole variety of reasons. When you're running a business and you're watching the numbers, basically you start to understand the math and how everything works in a company, because you run one. And you start seeing the issues with government. When I saw the bailouts in 2008, I couldn't believe it. I never thought that would happen in our country. Bailing out banks that made bad bets. They made bad bets. They got a lot of debt because of it. And then we just give them money so they can continue to operate. and then we assume the debt for that bill. The American taxpayers assume that debt for bailing out the banks. It happened in a lot of cases, my friend. I know some people are going to say, no, some of those banks paid back their, paid back those bailouts. That is true, but not all of them. I'll give you another example. GM never paid us back. Now that's not a bank, that's a corporation, but the principle is the same here. GM paid us back in worthless stock. Their stock never came back. We gave them an enormous amount of money, and they gave us, a feces ton of GM stock, and that stock just never recovered. So we got screwed. The American people got screwed on that one too. We paid the bill. We have to pay the bill. GM isn't going to pay it, and these auto manufacturers are still in trouble to this day. They're still in trouble. All of the banking system's in trouble right now. The housing market's starting to go under again, starting to. I don't want to alarm anyone. So, with all this in mind, and with all these stories that I covered, and I'm sorry this has gone on so long and everything, and I've been ranting, but basically, I'm going to ask you a question: is have you done anything to prepare in case 2008 happens again? A lot of people lost their homes. It's really unfortunate. A lot of people lost, more than their homes. They actually lost, their cars. They lost their jobs. They lost their livelihoods. Have you done anything, to protect yourself in case something like that happens again? Because frankly, folks, I'm seeing something coming up on the horizon here. Um, it doesn't look pretty either, because I don't know how we can get out of the next one. They haven't brought up interest rates far enough to be able to drop them like they did in 2008. That was a defense mechanism. That was a bullet in the gun to deal with the problems at the time in 2008. We were at 5.25% interest. They dropped them to zero. We're at 2.5% right now. So we can't drop 5% like they did last time. We might have to go negative this next time. Interest rates, that's a big part of it. But what's the other part? Printing money. That's really all they have left. And I think that may be the reason why, the whole gold thing is happening right now with the Bank of International Settlements. It's Basel III. I did a video on this. So all this stuff comes into play, but what is the big picture? I realize that that's what it all comes down to. There's all these microcosms, but what is the big picture? And the big picture is something's coming. And I don't know what it is or how big it's going to be. I don't know anything for a fact. But I got a feeling it's not going to be good. And and I'm not a financial consultant, and I try to say that on every video when I do these things, but gold and silver and crypto, seem to be probably the best places to go. Now, it may not seem like it at first. Crypto may go down some more. It may go down. In fact, it may go down a lot more. But I guarantee you it will recover before the stock market does. It will recover before the stocks and bonds do. So, but we'll do another video. I'll get Chaos Craig to do a podcast with me, and we'll talk about the bond yield curve inversion, because that's really important. And, it's important to understand that too, and why that's such a critical metric in ascertaining what's coming financially. Because you can often tell 3 to 6 months in advance what's going on in the markets by looking at the bond market. And that's one thing people don't tend to look at. They don't look at that very often. They really are fixated on the stock market. And I think, that's what we've been trained to do. Certainly here in the United States anyway. The health of the economy is tied to the stock market, right? As long as stocks are up and the Dow Jones is up and the S&P is up and the Nasdaq is up, everything's great. Go out and spend more money, get more debt. Because we're all doing fine. And the good times will keep rolling on, and you'll have money coming in to pay off that debt. But what if you don't? What if that doesn't happen? What is your plan? What's your plan? Well, without getting into, much longer, diatribe, it's all common sense stuff, folks. Pay off your debts. Get your debts taken care of. Don't buy anything new. Certainly don't finance anything. And do everything you can to get out of debt. Just use whatever time is left before this next recession, because this next recession might be, lead into something significantly worse than just a recession. I don't know. I don't know that for a fact. I don't know what the Federal Reserve's plans are to deal with the next one. It's probably just to print money because they can't drop interest rates more than 2.5% because that's where we're at, unless they're going to take us negative here in the United States. And that's a podcast all in itself. Japan and Germany and many other countries are in negative interest rates in their bond yields. That's a very interesting topic all on its own. No one even thought of that before 2008. No one thought there would be negative interest rates. And so basically, without me going into a lot of detail on that, if you guys remember Cyprus, the haircuts that were happening, governments were taking money out of people's accounts, people's bank accounts. Literally, they froze their bank accounts. The government just came in and scooped out 30% from everyone's account. That's the kind of stuff you get with negative interest rates. Don't think, oh, that's cool. I'll have negative interest rate on my home. No, it doesn't work that way. It's negative interest rates so the banks can actually take money from your accounts. That's, basically, like I said, haircuts. Another way they refer to that as a bail-in as opposed to a bail-out. So the banks just take money from their clients. I'm sorry it went on so long. I think these are important topics, and I left, I'm ending this one with the Jamie Dimon story. But keep all this stuff in mind. He is one of the bad guys. He's one of the guys creating this problem. And he comes in and he's blaming 50, people aren't making enough money. We need to raise, the minimum wage for Americans. Well, yeah, sure, let's go ahead and do that. But then the businesses will just charge more anyway to recover their losses from paying their labor, so much money. It's a no-win situation there on the minimum wage. Like I said, that's a complex subject, and we'll go into it in another podcast sometime. But for now, thank you very much for taking more than just a few minutes with me today to listen to this. And I hope you all have a good day. By the way, we've got some exciting podcasts coming up, so keep tuned in on the channel here. But we'll have some more podcasts with roundtables here coming up real soon. Thanks again for listening, guys. Have a good day.